Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, Wild Ones? Welcome to episode number 171 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today's interview might be one of the most important and challenging topics we've ever covered on the show. It's something every woman deals with in one way or another, healing the mother wound. Our guest, Bethany Webster, indulged all of my deepest questions and curiosities around what it means to become the mother you've always wanted and how to do that. We discussed how this kind of healing isn't about bashing our own mothers or the maternal figures in our lives, but the personal, collective, and spiritual healing every woman faces in her lifetime. We also got into guilt, grief, anger, and family systems, and we talked about the mother wound as an initiation and pain as a doorway to birthing oneself. Listen closely to this one, maybe more than once, and definitely join us in the Facebook group to continue the conversation if it's relevant to you. The Facebook group is at untameyourself.com/Facebook. The show notes for this episode can be found at untameyourself.com/episode-171. And weekly reminder, if you are listening in iTunes and have not yet left us a review, we love when you leave us reviews. It just helps other people like you who are looking for a show like this, for these types of conversations and insights and personal moments of awakening, to help find the show and spread the wild soul love. So thank you so much for that. Let's get into it. I'm here today with Bethany Webster, and I'm so freaking excited about this. I know so many of you listening are going to resonate with this, are going to love this. This is going to be one of those conversations that you tell me that you listened to like 5, 6, 7, 8 times. I could hear you already coming into the Facebook group telling me you're crying, or even I imagine this one also to be the type where people like pause it in the middle to come post in the Facebook group and be like, oh my God, it's so freaking good. Definitely a sharer. By the way, Bethany, no pressure. But it's just such a juicy topic. We're going to be largely talking about the mother wound today. So we'll get into that. But we have a question that we ask everyone before we get started always, the women anyway, which is, what do you love about being a woman?
That's a great question. There's so much to love about being a woman. And I think the thing that I would say, like the thing that came right to the top of my head is just the cycles, the changes. There's so much about being a woman that, and I'm a Cancer, so I'm like a water sign, and like I love feeling the range of what it means to be a woman, you know, everything from being fierce and like, you know, a badass, all the way to being like super soft and tender and, you know, and everything in between. And I kind of think that's what women are doing right now at our time in history, is embodying the possibility of what it means to be a human being. And, you know, men, I guess, you know, they really don't have as much permission to explore their feminine side. Yeah. And so I feel really lucky to be a woman right now, just because we do have that permission, and we're giving ourselves permission. We're claiming that for ourselves right now. So
that's actually a surprising number of people give like that answer, like almost verbatim. It's like the full range, the cycles, the freedom we have. And also it's amazing how many women acknowledge that like men don't have that permission for the full range the way we do. It's not, I mean, in like certain pockets and certain types of communities they might, but there's a lot of shame around that. And I certainly do think that's one way patriarchy has actually served us, huh? We've been like, one of the things I say all the time is like, a woman is not a lovelier version of a man. But actually us expressing those more masculine things is totally acceptable, because that's what they've been wanting us to do for thousands of years. I never made that connection before. That cracks me up. So your body of work is so amazing, because it's around this thing that I didn't even know I was doing for like, I want to say maybe like 3 years of when I first started getting into like personal development, healing, energy, subtle body, all that stuff. One thing kept coming up over and over and over again, and I felt like I was beating a dead horse on it. I'd be like, this again? And it was like stuff with my mom. Now, this is not to throw my mom under the bus, because my mom actually, for all intents and purposes, did a amazing job. Like, she's a great mom. And this thing that you talk about is the mother wound. And I know it's not just about our own personal mothers or whoever we related to as mother in our life, if we had someone to, but like it's a lot bigger than that. So I just want to go down this rabbit hole, girl. Where's the best place to start?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about what the mother wound is.
Yeah.
And kind of like carve out what we're talking about here.
Great.
And yeah, exactly. Like we all, I mean, I personally believe, and this has been my experience thus far, that the mother wound is really a product of living in a patriarchal culture that says women are less than, right? And broadly speaking, that's basically what the patriarchy is.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that one word, that's in itself a statement of scarcity, like not enough, not good enough, less than. And so women have had to cope with this, living in this atmosphere of patriarchy for generations, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers. And so it really creates a kind of tension where each generation of women is born with this demand to live as a full human being, right? Each generation, each one of us is born with, the drive and the desire to live our full potential. But when we hit the patriarchy, it's like, oh, we can't do that. So the mother wound really exists on these three levels: the personal, the relationship we have with our own mothers, any painful stuff there. But it's actually, this is a funny thing, it's actually really not about our mothers in the end. Healing the mother wound is really about healing the ways that our relationship with our mothers has created a limiting relationship with ourselves. So our mothers really teach us how to relate to ourselves, how to relate to our bodies, to our dreams, to food, to, all these things. So there's really not many significant relationships as significant as the relationship with our mothers. It's one of the biggies, and it determines so many things about how we become who we are. So that's the personal aspect of the mother wound. Painful dynamics with your mother and any internalized limiting patterns and beliefs that you have about yourself and about the world. The collective level, there's this collective female pain body, right? Like all of us are descendants of oppressed women throughout history. And so how have women coped with this heavy, wound of living in a patriarchy? So how women have harmed ourselves, harmed each other. So that's kind of the collective, piece. And then there's the spiritual aspect of the mother wound, which is the fact that inside the mother wound, there's a deeper wound, which is a wound with life itself. So not feeling like we belong in our bodies, not feeling like we belong on this planet, not feeling like we belong in community with our people, like just feeling isolated and disconnected.
I'm getting such a full body shiver. And again, it's like my own, and I'm feeling, I know my women so well because they're so active, and they'll come in and they'll tell me I know that one is hitting some of you super hard right now. So hang in. I'm going to hang in too. Keep going.
Yeah. So there's these three different levels. And so as you can see, it's a big one, right? This is a big thing. And most of us have been suffering with it to some degree. Some of us have great relationships with our moms, but we know that some of the beliefs or dynamics are actually limiting us, even though things are harmonious and copacetic and everything. And then there's those of us who once in a while have tension or stress with our moms, but generally, it's manageable. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where those of us who have downright abusive, traumatic relationships with our moms. So all of us range, and part of the work that I'm doing, my mission, is to take this taboo out of the shadow and out into the light, because this has been in shadow for so long because it holds so much of our power.
Big time.
And I actually believe that as we heal this big wound, we just take our personal piece, whatever piece we have, we help to heal the collective. We help to heal a spiritual wound of humanity.
Yeah.
It's all connected. And right now, in the world, what's happening, it's we're watching these patriarchal structures crumble, right?
Yeah.
Media, government, all these institutions, education, religion, everything's crumbling and being seen for the dysfunction that it has, the patriarchal structures.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the mother wound is coming up right now too, because it's also a patriarchal structure and it also needs to come apart and be dismantled. Because here's the truth. All of us have everything we need inside us. We have like a pristine fire that wants to be expressed. It's a divine, we are divine beings that want to embody, be embodied in human form. So this healing the mother wound process is it's not about becoming better. It's not about, improving ourselves. It's all about dismantling all these like limiting beliefs and patterns that we were told were true and releasing them so that that divine energy that wants to express can have its full expression. And I've seen it over and over, it's when we dismantle these pieces, we hear our voices, we know what to do. We get better at saying no. We get better at allowing pleasure and abundance into our lives. This is what really like knocked my socks off about this, was because I saw this shit happening automatically, like in my life in different areas, just because I worked on this one thing. And it was like automatically, it was like, oh, my relationships are changing. And oh, I have like this clarity about my career. And oh my God, I feel like I belong in my body for the first time in my life. Like really big stuff was happening. And I wasn't reaching out and trying to work on these areas. It just kind of started opening up on its own. So that's one of the reasons I was like, we need to talk about this. This is so key.
So key, so amazing. So actually, I remember one of the things that kind of like cracked me open around this topic was Casey Baker. I don't know if you know her. She's been on the podcast like way back in the beginning. Wrote a post on Facebook one day about this mother figure in her life who wasn't her actual mother. It was like a mentor, mother figure. And I was like, and the first thing I thought is, if I wrote a post like that about some other woman being like my mother, I think my mother would just die. Like she would be so hurt. And even that thought right there, that like maybe my own mother would not want me to be nourished by someone else because how it would reflect on her, kind of comes into this, like you were saying something under the personal, and also like kind of related to the personal and the collective, but like how women interact with each other, right? Whether it's a jealousy, whether it's a competition, whether it's like that scarcity, like, well, if my daughter's is getting nourished by that woman, like where's my role left? And I was like, all right, there's still a lot more here to unpack if like that was my thought around someone's beautifully written post. But on the other end of it, what it cracked me open to is, oh my God, I can be mothered. I can let other women mother me.
Yeah. So true.
And
so
I know
true.
on your website, like one of the things, I think one of the free things that you offer is something like becoming the mother you always wanted. Is that what it was called, or something?
Yeah, it's becoming the mother to yourself that you always wanted.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Your example is a great, what you just described is a great example of this. So many of us have watched our moms struggle, sacrifice themselves, be deprived on some level, whether it's emotionally or, living the patriarchy, our mothers and grandmothers, and they've really suffered. And so as daughters, it's really difficult to watch that and not feel like, oh my gosh, if I shine, am I taking away something from her? Because once again, you realize it's like an enmeshment, right?
It creates so enmeshed. I want you to, can we just back it up and say that again? Because it's so huge. Like how many women, and honestly, this isn't just a woman thing. It's intense in women, and I know men have this too. One of the things that I've said so many times is like daddy issues gets a lot of airtime, but it's like we've all got that whole mama side of things too. So thinking that if I shine, if I step out, if I do better, that in some way, shape, or form, it's like a betrayal, or it's like a downplay or something on my own mother or my mother figure or my family or my maternal lineage or whatever. That's a big deal. What happens when people feel that way?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, just the fact that we're making it conscious, I think is something to celebrate. Like
Yeah.
the fact that we're even talking about it is so big because it's such an underground feeling. And the reason why we feel that is because there's the sense that it's not enough for all of us. That, if a lot of the things that women say to me are, oh my God, I have so much strife with my mom, but if I even acknowledge it, I feel like I'm automatically blaming her. Right. So
Yes. And it's not about blaming them.
it's not. This is not mother blame. That's something that's been used against us as a form of controlling us to not look at this. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, we have to remember this. If we don't look at this,
Yeah.
we will perpetuate it. We will bring it into our friendships, to our children, to our primary romantic relationships, or whatever. So we have to deal with it. And I think in the past, people thought, well, if we don't look at it, it just goes away. Like we can pretend, and like pretending was a thing that people thought sold shit.
It was like, how do I deal with this? Take it on. Get a therapist. Oh, just pretend it's not happening. I'll take that.
Yeah, that was like the option of our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers.
It's like, that's actually not a solution.
It's not a solution. We now know that doesn't make stuff go away. Actually, it just kind of allows it to run wild and proliferate, So,
I
yeah,
even venture to say that it's wildly irresponsible because, like, as I reflect on the women in my own family, you choosing, and so I'm going to throw this out as a hypothesis.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily set in it, but I'd be really curious to see what you think. Any individual choosing not to face their own stuff is almost, in a sense, bundling it up and handing it down to the next generation and being like, you deal with it with a little extra stank on it because I haven't dealt with mine.
Oh, absolutely. That's not an exaggeration. Okay. That is actually true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so each generation has their bundle of stuff, right, that they've got, and so it's time, and this is my mission, is to help. I really want to integrate healing the mother wound and help women see that this should be like par for the course. This isn't like, oh, I'll eventually get to it, or maybe if I do spiritual stuff, I don't have to do it, or this has to be like the centerpiece of personal development and healing, because really you get everything out of this, no matter how many techniques or modalities or, freaking, things we learn, content, no matter how much content we digest, if we don't have a solid foundation, if we haven't looked at, the patterns, the beliefs that are unconscious in us that tell us we're not good enough, there's something wrong with me, and all of those really like deeply ingrained negative beliefs are usually fused in the mother relationship to some degree, because they're the hardest to kick, because they're fused with this sense of love, safety, and belonging, our deepest needs as human beings. And so whatever beliefs we receive through this channel of the mother are often the most unconscious and deeply ingrained, like in our blueprint. So that scares a lot of people. And that's usually why people are like, I don't want to go there. Like, everything's kosher. I don't want to like rock that boat. But what my message is, I'm here to say, is life is amazing when we get to this place where we actually aren't limited. You almost don't know. It's like going down a dark tunnel. It's like going down the birth canal. You don't know where you're going. It's dark, and there's no maybe light at the end of the tunnel yet, but we have to keep going. And this is all about really claiming our divine feminine potential, our power, and transforming the culture, and, making a new story for what it means to be a woman.
Yeah. And
even stretching beyond what we were talking about at the beginning, which is the capacity for what women can create in the world, like stretching it out.
Yeah.
We are those women that get to live this new way.
It's pretty amazing. So what this is reminding me of is actually one of the biggest things I hit on many years ago as I was looking at this, not realizing like mother wound was a thing, but like having all this stuff continuously come up with my mother. One of the things that I really struggled with in my 20s was making money. Really like, and I would go through these massive feast and famine. I've been entrepreneurial since I was 19. And, you know, at a certain point, I was always very independent. Basically, college came, I was 18, I moved out, I'd be home for summers, but like summer after, like I always had a job, like I was a self-sufficient person. And
Yeah.
after a while, it was like this unhealthy thing that I had going on with my mom. I realized at one point was like, oh my God, I keep creating these situations where I need her to bail me out financially because I don't need anything else from her at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's covered, I take care of myself. I don't, and again, I wasn't like tapped into like, you know, the nourishing aspect or just like the emotional support or whatever. Partially because I kind of was, what do they call it? The psychological term or the therapeutic term is like parentified at a young age, right?
Yeah.
Like as a young child, I was spoken to about adult things that I had no mental or emotional capacity to like really understand, but I was treated like a little adult. And so I kind of like missed out on like actually feeling very mothered or nourished. So anyway, I get to this point. I'm like, well, I don't need anything else from her. And unconsciously, I discovered, I remember like, I literally remember the day I realized this. I remember like, I had
Wow.
just come from a session with a person I was working with. I was in Whole Foods. I was sitting there with my friend Carrie, and I was like, holy shit. All this money stuff
Boom.
has been me creating something to like give my mom a place and space where she can still take care of me. Because I
Yeah.
felt like that's how she could feel valued. Like talk about codependent, right? But just like fascinating, and I lob that out there as an example,
Yeah.
just for you to take and run with on the conversation, but also for anyone listening to be like, what are the really interesting cycles, the places you return to over and over and over again, and how potentially could they relate to this conversation we're having right now?
Oh my gosh, so true. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like we will keep replicating those patterns in order to create safety, right? And sometimes, and this is what it's really all about. And let's look at the inner mothering piece that I didn't quite answer yet. This is really all about safety, inner safety, right? So especially for women that want to like go out there and make something happen or let go of a pattern that isn't working or, you know, go into the unknown, so to speak. It's usually when the mother wound issues really come up. It's when we're wanting to create something new and we're on the precipice. We're at the horizon of something new. And then, you know, our adult self is like, I got this. I know the tools. I got the support. I'm on it. The problem that often happens is the little girl inside of us is
Totally.
like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm not safe. Bad things happened last time I tried this. No, we are aborting mission, done, you know? And that's something like I figured out along the way that really gave me a huge like boom, you know, moment. I was in my 20s also trying to do something big, you know, step into a whole new area that no one in my family had ever stepped into, making money, doing stuff. And I was like, I want to be big. I want to use my voice. I want to like step forward. And I just couldn't do it. And I was so hard on myself. Like, why? What's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just like go for it? I'm a smart person. I've done tons of, you know, things. And I realized that the times in my life as a child that I had really been spontaneous and confident, used my voice, I was really withdrawn from and shamed. And in those moments. So I learned, and the times that I was loved and welcomed and celebrated was more when I was invisible or, you
Interesting.
know, allowing someone else to be in the center, you know? So I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. No wonder this is so hard for me. My inner little girl thinks I am going to be abandoned if I step in a bigger, scarier way,
Yeah.
you know? So exactly looking at if there's a stuck place, how does the stuck place originate in your childhood?
Yeah.
You know, where did this start showing up? Like, for example, not saying no, you know, where did you have to say yes when you meant no and when you were a child? When did you have no choice? You know, it's like, this is a formula that I've used over and over again with myself and then helping other people get used to going back. We have to go back to move forward. And it's
Totally.
not,
And I think people get tired, people must get tired
yeah,
of hearing that on the show, or maybe they don't, being like, really?
yeah,
I have to go look back at my childhood again? But it's like, yeah, because that's where the seeds were planted and the roots are, you know?
yeah,
And it's not always something that happened in childhood. Sometimes it's like, all right, this was a new thing. I never had dealt with this before. But what's really
yeah,
funny is every time we think something's new, we can go, but I see where the seed was planted for that in my childhood.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like the past isn't really the past the way that I think people used to think. Like if something is over, then it's done. But really,
Right.
the past is in every single moment in the things that show up over and over. Like it's the past saying, heal me, let's work through this,
This is a really amazing point because something I love to talk about on the show is like spiritual bypass, all the different ways that we use our
Yeah.
various tools, modalities, what we know, our new age gimmicks, all these things to actually bypass what's really going on. And so many of the teachings are around like being present and being in the moment, but what you just said really threads that in. It's like, yeah, we're not trying to always live in the past. We're not trying to like be victims or focus on what has happened, but the thing is that it's showing up in your present. It's not
Yeah.
just in the past. It's like it's showing up in your present, in your relationships, in your whatever. Thank you. Just somehow that had never like clicked in for me before until you said it just now the way you said it. That was awesome.
Right. Yeah. There's a sense that like, oh, we have to go back. So reframing it like, no, we're not going back. We're actually being right here and now with what's
Yeah,
happening. That's the reverberation, the living reverberation
totally.
that happened then. Yeah. So back to the mothering piece. The way we do that and the way that I teach this is really about how to mother yourself so that that little girl inside of you, gets whatever she didn't get, back in the day for
Totally.
whatever reason, not, to blame or shame but just for whatever reason, you didn't get what you needed. So how can you embody that loving, nurturing, mother to yourself that really gives your little girl abundantly the
Totally.
things that she needed? Because when this clicks, and this is a skill and it's a learning curve and it takes time, but it can be done. That's when things really like accelerate. When that little girl inside of you realizes, oh, I'm not in a traumatized state anymore. The dangers of the past are no longer present.
Yeah.
I actually do have an adult, a wise, loving adult who's there for me. Then when when that little girl gets that, that's when you can really become unstoppable.
Yeah.
You know?
It's unbelievable because I'm not that long, only about 6 months out of a relationship where, I've been doing this type of work for like years and years and years and years. And somehow, like 3.5 years ago, I got myself in a relationship that would ultimately culminate in me being like, damn, that stuff went so much deeper than I thought. And now I get to look at all of it.
Yes.
And so much stuff. Like I'm not really sharing many like personal details because I'm still like unwinding and like healing from a lot of it,
Sure.
but it was just like, wow, talk about like the massive ways it'll show up. And this is why like pretending and it's not that I was ever pretending, but even I think sometimes thinking like, oh, I've handled that. Oh, I
Yeah.
looked at that. Oh, I did an inner child meditation once. Like, listen, inner child meditation once is not necessarily going to solve all the problems.
Well, if you think about it, Elizabeth, it's like, think about how long it took for these patterns to get laid down.
Ingrained. Yeah.
Why do we have this expectation? I mean, I think it's cultural and marketing and all of it.
Yeah. Instant gratification.
Something I'm trying to it's always a challenge to help people see that these patterns took so long to get laid down. It's going to take a while for them to get dismantled,
Totally.
deconstructed.
Yeah, and I mean, I say this to people all the time, and like the biggest emphasis is on like just being gentle. You got to be gentle with yourself. And we also talk about too a lot of times like the idea of that spiral staircase, right? If you're walking on a spiral staircase, you're going to pass around, you're going to loop around, you're going to see the same stuff over and over and over again, but just from a different perspective. Hopefully, from an elevated perspective, if you're spiraling up.
Exactly. We're always moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know what just popped into my mind? I was on an airplane, it was a couple of years ago, and I think I was flying back and forth from LA at the time. And this person, I mean, must have been like a talent agent or something like that, just like made a comment to like this little girl and her parents, how she was like, super stunning and should totally like consider coming in for, whatever, be a little child model or actress or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the little girl was like so happy, just like just like so proud of herself. And it was like later on, like I don't know how long later, and I'm not going to make up the time frame, but the little girl like brought it back up to her mom. I was only sitting a couple rows away from them, and she was like, "Oh my god, I saw something like I can't believe, Mom. Like, do you remember what that guy said?" she's just like so happy. And the mom just like whoosh, basically shut it down. She was like,
Oh,
don't get so full of yourself. And I
oh
was
no.
like, oh, like I felt like the mom like smacked me or like punched me in the solar plexus. And again, it's not about blaming or shaming, right?
Right.
Like, because where, I mean, in talking about what it goes back and how it's in the lineage and like all these things, like women learned, like it's not safe for you to shine, like be careful. So she probably thought she was like protecting her daughter.
Right. Oh my gosh, it's so true. A lot of this stuff our moms handed down to us because that's what was given to them, or they're like, that's how we survive. That's how women survive in a patriarchal culture. Don't rock the boat. Don't be too big. Don't be too loud, or don't be crazy. Just don't be yourself, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Can we talk about guilt? Because I feel like that's one of the most, I'm
Oh my God.
sure, nasty, nasty culprits of all this thing.
Totally. Guilt is the ultimate controller of females, I think. It's a tool. A lot of people think, and this is something that's like a reframe. A lot of women think, the guilt they feel is like, I'm not a good person, or if like I feel anger towards my mother, I'm not a good person, or I'm not happy in my relationship, I'm not a good person. There's this misconception that the guilt that we've been carrying around is about being a good person or not, like a conscience thing. But in reality, the guilt that we're carrying is actually an artifact of the control. It's a control.
Ugh.
Like, oh, I feel guilty for eating that piece of cake, or I feel guilty for the true feelings I have, but it's like, we shouldn't be feeling guilty about these things. These are our true, authentic needs, impulses, guidance, instincts. And we've been taught that we should feel guilty for them. And that's just, again, another way for being less than, of being
Big
smaller,
time. And control, right? Like us trying to control every little thing so we could be whoever we need to be to stay safe or get love or approved of or whatever. I get awesome. Another just like great little connecting the dots on guilt being like a side effect of control. Like if I didn't think eating that cookie was bad for me and I was trying to like restrict myself, I wouldn't feel guilty about it if I ate the friggin' like if I had never learned that a cookie was bad for me, I would feel zero guilt if I had the freaking cookie, just like to have a very basic example. So interesting.
Right.
Guess what, everybody? The Wild Soul Oracle deck is officially open for pre-order, and you can grab yours at wildsoulmovement.com/oracle. This is something I've been working on all year, which those of you who follow me on Facebook or Instagram know, as I've been posting some behind-the-scenes photos. But this Oracle deck was basically inspired by looking at our modern media-saturated world and observing that there's more than enough others trying to tell us what things mean and asking us to trust them. With this deck, I'm offering you untouched images of flowers, healing mantras and messages, illuminating reflection questions and rituals, each of which invites you to connect to the meaning, wisdom, and truth within and to trust yourself. The cards are beautiful. I had two amazing artists help us out with this. I wrote the guidebook while I was traveling through Europe in February. It is just beyond my wildest dreams. I hope you all love it too. Again, that link is wildsoulmovement.com/oracle. And this is our first run, so we do have limited availability. So if you want one, head over there and grab it because they are going to sell out. Now back to the show. And so
Yeah.
where I find I've also had a lot of conversations in recent months about gaslighting. This idea of people just denying your reality. And obviously there's like the malicious kind of gaslighting where people know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to like manipulate you on purpose to get their way. But what I find more often than not that's actually more challenging to deal with is the people who don't even know they're doing it. Because their constructed sense of reality is like so strong and they're holding on to it with everything they've got. They have to deny yours because if yours is in conflict with theirs, well, they absolutely cannot allow theirs to crumble.
Oh yeah, it would be a threat to their identity. Yeah.
And so I feel like guilt is a form of gaslighting, right? Because there's so many, like, I just think of so many times in my family where like my brother will be like, stop trying to guilt me. And my mom will be like, I'm not. And it's like, she's not trying. She doesn't even know she's doing it. It's like ingrained. So like guilt as a form of gaslighting. Then here's where I'm going on this tangent.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we feel like, well, they're not doing it on purpose. They
Hmm.
don't know. But like, that doesn't friggin' make it okay.
No, it doesn't. One of the biggest things that I think helps us change behaviors that are we're like invested in that hurt us is seeing the futility of continuing on. A lot of us
Yeah.
have this belief that we can just be the bigger person. That's a big trap. Or put up with it because we're a good person, like that somehow makes you a good person to tolerate a lot of poor treatment from people. Really seeing through that, that's an illusion. That's an illusion. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the other person. Um, so yeah, guilt is kind of a collective gaslighting of women. We've been taught all these things like we should be guilty for our pubic hair. We should feel guilty for the fact that we don't want to work, 60 hours every week. We should feel guilty. We're not perfect. And perfection again is another form of control, right? Like
Yeah.
perfection isn't human.
Ultimate control.
It's not human.
I
Perfection.
love Brene Brown says something along the lines of like the idea of perfection is so seductive because the idea that I could control everything to the point that like no one could possibly judge me or criticize me. I mean, what's more seductive than that? It's
Oh my
also
God.
like you said, it's like illusion, not a reality, not even possible. There's way too many humans with their own perceptions that like you're not going to get judged or criticized ever in your life.
And I think we need to get comfortable. And this is something I encourage. I say, when we heal the mother wound, we have to be rebels. You got to be a rebel to heal the mother wound because as you do, you're debunking so many things, that you're most lovable when you're small, that all these things that we've been taught. Like the mother relationship can be this channel of patriarchal mandates. And so we have to be able to face, if we really want to overturn the patriarchy and become empowered women, we have to look at the ways in which we've received them from our mothers in our most intimate relationships and our most intimate self. And we have to actually walk through the guilt. We have to feel the guilt and do it anyway. We have to be those mothers to ourselves where we say, you know what, it is safe for me. I am saying it is safe for me to say no. It's safe for me to be big. And the way that we give ourselves that permission is usually two things: mental clarity, getting really clear on the magnitude of what you went through as a child. Like, what were the ways you had to give away your power, that you had to endure things that were horrible on some level, even minor things. It's not about like,
It's about everything exists on a spectrum, right?
a spectrum, but also emotional processing. We have to really take in the magnitude of what happened, but also grieve that we can't change it. We couldn't change no matter how much of a good
Totally.
no matter how much we tried or how much we rebelled, we couldn't. We were kids. We were powerless. We couldn't change our families or our circumstances. So grieving that and grieving that we couldn't heal our mothers or, seeing what our
Totally.
grandmothers and our great grandmothers went
Yep.
through. So there's like this collective grieving process that we have to go through where we really come to terms with like seeing it like clearly what we've been through. And I think when we do that, Elizabeth, we get automatically in touch with our true worth. When we can feel healthy outrage on behalf of the little girl that we were, when we can feel angry about how our mothers suffered and our great grandmothers, but more importantly, you, because you get to live for yourself, okay? This isn't about being the savior for the world. Honestly,
Totally.
we have to do this for ourselves. So for that little girl, this is the one that's in the shadow. She's the answer, right?
And you know what's so cool that I've noticed, and people have heard me say this on the show before, I'm sure you'd agree, and I'm sure you have your own examples, and just as everyone listening, when you do your own work, it really is an invitation for the people around you to actually do their own or change or see it if they're going to. Like I say all the time, I mean, for all the years that I spent thinking it was my job to fix other people and I tried to, and that didn't work at all. It's so awesome that all I have to do is keep doing my own work and showing up as like this new version of me. And then actually the people around me, they do adjust. And sometimes they ask questions and sometimes they make better choices. Like as I have boundaries and they have to respect them, they question where are their own boundaries. Like there were times of when it was not elegant at all though, of starting to have boundaries and like stand up to people in my family. I remember one time like I said no to my mom. I was very firm with my mom about something. And my dad called me and he's like, hey, would you mind like doing this thing for your mother? And I was like, yeah, actually I do mind and I'm not gonna. Because we've all been doing this for way too long. And this is why she thinks it's okay for like this, and this. I don't even remember what the scenario was. And he was like, oh, actually, You make a good point. I'm like,
Cool.
why do we all say yes to these things that we're not freaking okay with? And that is a term you just used, which I wrote down, which is this is healthy outrage. Again,
Yeah.
I think in like the self-help personal development place, people are afraid to not be positive for like a minute because they're worried that they're gonna like
So
taint
true.
taint their frequency or their vibration, or I'm gonna manifest something horrible. But it's like, no, like, and if you don't express that stuff, the thing is you're feeling it anyway. It's going on in your system. So whether you're admitting it to yourself or not, like it's still messing with your frequency or your vibration anyway.
Oh my gosh, so true. And I see it's like with my clients, it's like I see when they hit the anger, it's like boom. That's when like the gates open, their power becomes
Totally.
available. There's creative energy. And there's this permission, there's a sense of worthiness. I think, you know, it's all about that healthy outrage because how can we really know how much we're worth if we haven't taken in how much we've suffered in the ways that we were, had to give our power away? We have to say that wasn't okay.
Yeah.
That
And
wasn't
like believing
okay.
that we weren't worthy, or that we what like the opposite side of the worthy coin. I always say like I don't really feel like I've ever had worthiness issues, but my side of it has been too much.
Yes,
And too
yes,
much is just the flip side of the coin. It's just like a different context for the same issue of like
right.
insufficiency in some way, shape, or form, regardless of the direction it goes in.
Totally. Yeah. Too much, too little. It's same, not enough,
Yeah.
not good, not good enough. Yeah, exactly.
We've had other guests. We had an interview with Philip McKernan a couple months ago. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a great dude. Where he talked about anger, and like this comes up a lot in my own communities and work with women. It's like I think this is anger. I think is actually one of the magical elixirs for like the
Oh,
21st century woman. That's just like if you are willing to go there. And I loved you said something earlier. I've said this often about fear, like feel the fear and do it anyway. But you said feel the guilt and do it anyway, and I love that
yeah.
because guilt
Ab-
is just like another, again, byproduct of fear. When we feel guilty and we choose to not do something, it's because we're afraid there's going to be some consequence we don't necessarily feel like dealing with. But so pushing the button on the anger and going in, regardless of what is the fear of what floodgates might open, there's so much freedom there. And I love that you also said there's creativity because this is something I discovered in my own like relationship with anger in the last few years. And I'm like, oh, now that I have a more empowering relationship to anger, now that I'm not afraid of it, now that I'm not judging it or making it wrong, when I feel it, I could be like, all right, and I get to do something about this thing that I'm angry about now.
yeah.
So there
Oh,
really is some like life force in anger.
yeah, absolutely. It's the reclaiming of our personal power, I believe.
Totally.
Because we've been broken down at some point. Anger is just a message that a boundary's been crossed, something's been violated. It's a natural, normal response.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to begin to embrace our anger towards our mothers and not see it as pathology and that we're a bad person, but it's actually an authentic emotion. It makes sense. It's normal and natural. And we have to process that. Otherwise, it's going to get morphed and become toxic and go into competition, comparison with other women, not trusting ourselves, not trusting each other.
Totally.
And we need each other. We need ourselves right now. So,
And disease. I mean, I know sometimes people are like, yeah, whatever. But like this stuff, it's energy. And if it's toxic and you're holding it in your body, like why do we think so many people, like so much cancer, so much unexpressed, repressed emotion, all these things that people have stuffed and not wanted to deal with? Like there's way too many amazing like books and awesome stories and healings of people who like, yep, they might have done the Western medicine, maybe they didn't, but they actually dealt with their emotional stuff and it was like, oh, I got better.
yep. Yeah, I think we're this interesting generation where we're getting it. It's like,
Yeah.
we have to process this. If we don't, we pass it on. And, yeah, there was something else I was going to say about that, processing the emotions. Oh, yeah. Like what I like to say is the mother wound isn't something we need to be ashamed of. It's not a black hole, this abyss of pain.
Totally.
It's a doorway. It's a birth
Oh,
canal.
cool.
It's an initiation
Yes.
into our true power as women. We can't get this power anywhere else. It's not like we can just go learn techniques and modalities. This is the place. We have to go to the wound. If we really want to embody it, we got to go to the place that we felt in exile from it. We have to go back to reclaim it. And, it's like in many ways we become, as we heal this, We give birth to ourselves. We express that amazing little girl inside of us with her innocence and wisdom and purity and beauty. I mean, she's the connection to source, right? That little girl inside of us, she's connected to the earth, to all things. And we also get in touch with it, I think, like a crone aspect of us, which is like that fierce, not taking any bullshit.
Totally.
And these two parts of us become integrated into this amazing goddess shaman archetype. That's kind of how I experience it. That's like all of it. That's like unapologetically unconventional, not afraid to be who she is, says no, doesn't tolerate, but also is fiercely loving and embracing and, not afraid to be herself. So I think we're like, as we women pass through this portal and heal this mother wound process, it's not like the wound goes away and we're just like, it's over. The wound transforms into a source of wisdom and overflowing like life force that we can use.
I love that. And it becomes more of like a scar than an open, gaping, infected wound.
Exactly.
You also brought up grief, and I really appreciate that. Grief is something I've been looking at a lot lately. And in fact, in one of my groups recently, at the time of recording this, I posted something. I was just curious about what was everyone's relationship between anger and grief. What I'm finding in my own like recent leg of healing I'm doing after this relationship is, wow, anger, grief. Like usually the other is not far behind when the first one has come to the surface. What's your experience of that, or any theories or anything you want to say about that?
Oh yeah, I think they're definitely related. Sometimes, but not always in like this formulaic way. I think they're connected, but anger sometimes is like, sometimes we're angry in defense over a grief, like grief that's underneath. So sometimes it can be like anger that we're like, it's grief we're not quite conscious of,
Yeah.
So it's just a layer, it's like, oop, okay, here's anger. We get through it. Oh, here's the grief that it was on top of. And in terms of grief, I feel like grief is like the holiest thing, because when we grieve long enough, when we do the grieving process long enough with its many layers and undulations, that's where freedom is. That's where it is. And I think one of the things that I do with my clients and with people I talk to is just to try to teach them to see their relationship with grief as a really devotional kind of relationship. Like when the grief comes up, not being like, oh my God, I'm feeling sad again. I don't have time to feel sad. Like hate their sadness. But instead seeing that actually when we grieve, we're not stuck. Actually, if you're grieving, you're moving through it.
Totally. If you're feeling it, you're moving through it.
Yeah. So to welcome grief as like a dear, 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 dear friend, a holy visitor, and make the space for it, make the time and space to grieve, because it's so holy, and it's the passage, it's the passage to freedom.
Yeah. So I'm super curious. Do you suggest, it might be a case by case basis, it might depend the answer. Do you suggest that people like go into grief on purpose, or like literally wait till it comes up? And I know there's different stages of grief. Like when it's fresh, it's just like constant, ever present, and it's there, and it's like your shadow. But when time has passed and it's like, oh, like I know everyone can relate to missing someone, and whether it's like a relative, someone who's passed away, a friend, a former partner, whatever, and like you smell something, or that song comes on, or it's that movie or that place that you were together, like you get slammed with some memory and you're like, oh, I can't believe I would have that intense of a response right now. So I imagine the answer might be both, but what are your thoughts on going into grief both like proactively and then, I don't want to call it reactively, but passively as it arises naturally?
Yeah, I think you can do both. Like grief does have its own timeline.
Yeah.
So there is a truth to that. Like we can't make people get frustrated. They're like, I'm trying to grieve and I can't. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to make it happen. Like, induce it. Grief has a wisdom in the way that it flows. So for example, you will not process anything until your body and soul is ready, good and ready. You can try to make that step come. But if you really want to move through something and you're not feeling it emotionally, go mentally, go with the cognitive. Like, what are the losses that you experienced through? And this is something I, encourage women to do in my process, a very measured way of structuring the process so that you can get the mental clarity on, what were the losses you experienced through, what happened to you, what you experienced, what was the cost to it, to that. So there are things that we can arrive at grief through getting the clarity and then really sitting with that clarity.
I dig that. That's really awesome.
So if you want to grieve, but you're not there, go with the cognitive piece and look at, what were the things that you want to reflect on that will help you get there. I mean, grief is really a manifestation of us moving from one level to another, right? So anytime we open our heart, we will experience loss. When we're opening up to love, we're opening up to death. The two of them are really connected. So when we're grieving, it's like we're grieving a part of ourselves. We're grieving something that was alive, some form, whether it's a person or us or a belief that really supported us. There's so many things we grieve. And then as we're doing that, it's like the parts of our being are being reintegrated and reorganized in a new way.
Yeah.
So that whole new part of us can emerge out of that. And that's like an organic process. It's just like the tree growing out of the earth. We're also part of nature. And so when we're good and ready, things are going to flow. But we can also beckon it and welcome it and say, I'm ready, by doing the cognitive piece of like, I want to go to the next level. I'm ready. I want to use this pain consciously to give birth to myself. And, it's so holy and amazing. And
I just love, you've said it several times, I just love the idea of birthing myself through the pain. The pain is the portal. The pain is the passageway. It just makes so much sense. The other thing you were just saying, do you know who Jason Silva is? He makes these beautiful YouTube videos. He goes into like these deep thinky type of topics, like philosophy.
Not pulling up his face.
Like the very first one I saw like many years ago now is one on like the existential bummer. And it's just like so beautiful. And like, that's what he talks about. It. There's some line from like a poem by Rilke. I don't remember what it was, but that's what he's talking about. He's like, inherent in love is already sadness, because like you pick this beautiful flower and you're like, oh God, it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And somewhere in you knows that it's going to die. Same with like all your relationships, right? Like whether they die because someone dies first, or whether like the relationship actually ends or whatever it is, like inherently in being willing to risk loving, you're signing yourself up for pain one way or another.
Absolutely. And to bring it back to the mother wound, think about how vulnerable and open and in need we are when we're babies and when we're children.
Well, and to be a mom and to hold this thing in your arms and be like, oh my God, it's going to die someday. Please let it not be before me.
Exactly. So there's both from the mother and the child. It's like this primary dyad of humanity, and I think all of our fears come down to one fear, which is being alone. And all of us felt that aloneness when we were really little and weren't able to process it. Yeah. So when we grieve anything, part of us is still grieving that original aloneness that's so existential, so primordial. And yeah, that's why I think we have to bring it all the way back, it all the way back.
It's cool. So speaking of bringing it all the way back, I'm kind of doing this backwards. I mean, I'm never one of those people who's going to be like, so what's your story? But what's the origin story to this being your body of work? Like what made this be the thing like you couldn't not do in your own life?
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I avoided looking at my relationship with my mother for years. I was in my 20s, really adrift. I think I was like 19. I got an abortion and I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I don't know what's going on. I got unexpectedly pregnant and I'm like, I have to give birth to myself before I give birth to someone else. I really just like.
How did you have that awareness as a 19-year-old? Like there's no way 19-year-old me was being like, oh yes, I must birth myself before I can birth another human.
No, I was pretty like aware, but I was also so freaked out. Like it felt like if I give birth to this child unconsciously, I'm actually going to die on some level. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? Okay. It was just really clear that I had to like get my shit together and start figuring out who I was, because I was kind of starting to live my mother's life, starting to kind of do the same things she did. So, but then, so I got into spirituality and into personal growth but I really avoided looking at it. I was like, let me do everything else but. I was a spiritual bypasser basically
Yeah.
for my, early 20s.
I think that's like a stage we all go in. I think we
Yeah,
must. We
totally.
must.
We got to like debunk that, right? 'Cause it's the
Totally.
easy path.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I realized no matter what I was working on in therapy, whether it was my relationship with money, my relationship with food, or my relationship with, any area of my life, it always eventually came back to the same thing, which was the beliefs and patterns that originated from my relationship with my mom. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to actually look at this because I
Yeah.
could see how not looking at it and avoiding it was postponing, everything I wanted.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I was like, all right, I have to do this. And so I did. And I started looking at it. My relationship with my mother blew up. I mean, because I was a parentified child as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
was her everything, emotional confidant, surrogate spouse, everything,
Totally.
basic. So I was like, nope, I don't want to do that anymore. I need to take care of myself. The relationship blew up. I actually don't have contact with my mother at all. It was one of the saddest things, like the last resort of trying and trying to make it work, like literally like to my detriment, like, oh my God, I want this to work. And then just realizing I'm actually going to get sick. I'm going to like, things are not going to go well. I have to, think about my well-being here.
I
So
appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of people think successful outcome of any of this kind of work means harmony.
no, it's not true. Yeah, it's like the success of healing the mother wound isn't about whether your relationship with your mom continues and gets better or whatever or not. The success actually can look like both. It can look like a healthier relationship with your mom, and it can look like, no contact, which is my story.
Yeah.
And I think I went so far down my healing path, and commitment to growth through this process and realized, wow, I didn't die, like
Yeah.
I didn't die through this. This is actually a portal, a pathway. And I really want women to know who have had to be in this awful position of last resort. I can't even have contact with my mom, to know that you can survive it and you can thrive. And actually it's kind of an initiation into your power if you really want to go for it. So,
And even like you said earlier, it doesn't make you a bad person.
no,
I
no,
think,
no.
and again, I don't know if this is, you can tell me if you think it's actually part of like the patriarchal mindset or conditioning, like obligation. I think a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of people
Yeah.
view on family as these are your people. And actually, someone shared something in one of my groups earlier today that's like, there's the family that you're born into and there's the family that you choose.
Yeah. Oh,
And that's an
absolutely.
option. That's an option on the menu. Like I grew up in a family that's very much, I just watched everyone endure and be obligated and like do things because they thought they had to. Like I'm a rebel in my family because I say no to a lot of things. Even like the last couple of years, I don't really go home for the holidays anymore. And every year it breaks their heart. And every year I have to face the guilt. And every year I have to look at myself and go, is this really what's best for me? And go, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. It is not like the self-sacrificing thing. I just won't do that anymore. And it doesn't make me a bad person. They might even call me a bad person. Oh, let me
Yes.
tell you, the first. And so, like, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've
Oh,
certainly had the
yeah.
experience of them getting shit from everyone. Even my brother being like, don't ever do this to me again. Like, me choosing myself was doing something to him. Like, when you do this to us, that's such an interesting, like, I'm not actually doing anything to you. I'm just choosing myself, but it's painful.
Yeah. I think absolutely that's a great example. Like the family is like the prime way that patriarchal values are enforced, passed down. And, the more unhealthy families are very much like systems, right? So the healthier a system is, the more latitude there is for individuality and choices. The
Totally.
more dysfunctional a family is, the narrower the choices are for individuality. And the more people will have backlash and shaming and pathologizing because the family is so dysfunctional and its equilibrium is so tenuous that people who step
Great
out
way
of
of
the
putting
norm
it.
have to be shamed, blamed to get back into line. So we have to be able to endure the backlash that comes when we choose ourselves, take good care of ourselves, make our own choices, take responsibility, I mean, the sad thing is that this is something we have to rework in our culture, that the ultimate, what's the word? The ultimate example of responsibility is working through our childhood histories so that we can be conscious adults.
Yeah.
But in a patriarchal, dysfunctional family, that is viewed as betrayal, blasphemy, and the ultimate, betrayal of the family.
Yeah.
So we are actually living a new paradigm into being. We are the first ones that are starting to make this mainstream, where we can actually model this new way of being true to ourselves and not seeing it as either or, I'm a good girl or I'm a bad girl.
Yeah.
Actually this is all about women and mothers and daughters having a full expanded range of what it means to be a full human being with complexity, with a wide range of expression, and not just being in this like small corset of expression that we've all been taught is desirable, which means be, very yielding and compliant. And guess what? Part of living a new paradigm into being is having to bust up against those same things in our families. This is not easy, but it must be done if we really want to break these intergenerational dysfunctional paths.
Agree. I saw on your website you're writing a book.
I am.
When will it be out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's still in process. It's been a long time, but I'm so excited about it.
Is there a release date yet or no?
No, not yet. I'm taking my sweet time.
Good. Do it. Writing a book is not talk about a birthing process.
Oh my gosh. And there's so many stories and things to talk about. So I'm going to make it as like simple and digestible, because my goal is really for each woman to feel permission to really explore this. And see it as the initiation and opportunity that it is.
It's a mega opportunity. Well, Bethany, thank you. I love this conversation. So juicy. I could just sit here with you for like hours and like go through all the different stories and things that happen. So we're going to put links to everything, to your website, to your opt-ins and all that stuff in the show notes. Is there anything I didn't ask you, or just like any closing thought that you're like, ooh, I didn't say this one thing and I really wanted to say it?
Yeah, I think I just want to reiterate that if you are dealing with any tension, stress in relationship with your mom, to just know that you're not alone. And it's really nothing to feel shame about at all. And in fact, it shows that if you're conscious of it, it shows that you're really ready to, move through it and into something huge. It's not just something you need to tolerate, feel guilty about, or avoid. It's really a doorway into your full power.
That's great. Well, thank you so, so much. Everyone listening, as always, come on into the Facebook group. If you want to keep up the conversation, it's at untameyourself.com/Facebook. Hey, this is, like I said earlier, this is a big one. This applies to just about everybody. So if you have someone in your life who could use this, definitely share it with them. If sharing this with maybe your own family, like maybe you have brothers and sisters, and you could be like, you guys, let's listen to this together and talk about, like, maybe this opens up some conversation for you and your loved ones around, damn, all right, we got some work to do, and we could do this. We could do this individually, but also support each other together. Use this is why we have this show. So you guys can take the conversations, run with them, glean the insights, and find your own, whatever it is that you need to find. So again, Bethany, thank you so much. Everyone listening, thank you so much. And we'll see all of you later.
We need an initiation. Initiation is critical for our psychological and social development. It's not a nice idea from a bygone era. It is what is now and what is next. I'm a part of this. That's why I speak the way I speak and do the things I do, because this needs to come. It is coming back.
Yeah.
Because if this planet is to heal, which it is healing, with or without us, it's going to heal. It's healing. The masculine has to heal. We can't continue to cast the divine masculine into the shadow, totally. And we've done that with the feminine as well, but we have to. The men need initiation. It's a different type of initiation, and I was lucky enough to have my uncle, who's my next mentor, to initiate me into manhood. He didn't know what he was doing, and I didn't know what he was doing until retrospect, and got much older. But he initiated me into my manhood by teaching me how to lift. I learned the discipline of lifting weights. I learned the process of lifting weights. I discovered the sacred space associated with lifting weights. My dad bought a power rack and he put it in the basement. And I go down into that basement, turn on the music, and it became a womb for transformation. I mean, I go down into the basement, and weeks later, I'm 10 pounds heavier, and I've got these muscles in places that I didn't know I could have them. I'm lifting things. I literally went down into that basement, and it was a womb to be transformed.